I would say this, like Ian and I definitely have a tendency to be nuanced, and sometimes to a fault. Like we hate exposition. We hate leading people by the nose. Like we want you to, watch the movie and come to your own conclusions based on what the visuals and in dialogue and scenes are presenting to you. We hate grabbing people and saying, "Hey, this is what we want you to think. This is what we want you to take away from that." Like it's all chummed in there, right? It's all in there. But and we're definitely like you have a perspective and then laying that out for you. But it's like there is always pressure to I just need you to say that, like you just say that, or and it's like for us that takes all the fun out of movies.
We talk a lot on this series. It's something it's sort of a thing that Paul kind of coined, which is just hashtag content at this point, which is this idea that like there's a lot of stuff that just gets made, particularly maybe for streaming platforms and things like that, that just doesn't really have much of an idea behind it or much of a soul behind it, or there's just a lot of it that's just getting sort of churned out. And this is like the exact opposite of that. It feels like something that is, not only very intentional, like Paul said, but just something that like is truly and like the voice of, I was going to say a single individual, but I guess two individuals in this case. But it feels like it's something that is not, cookie cutter, not made by committee or anything like that. But I am kind of curious, I brought this up in one of my questions I sent you guys at the beginning, earlier today, but this idea, I'm kind of curious as to how you guys think about theme in the movies and think about, because the story, there's obviously this sort of surface level of, a murder plot, assassination plot and all that kind of stuff that's dark. But it's actually kind of dark to think of Santa as being, subsidized by the United States government and not really, making ends meet and having to take on military contracts and do all that kind of stuff. Like, that's a funny gag, but is there anything under that for you guys felt like something that you wanted to talk about, or was that commentary on anything? Or it feels like such a dark undertone for Kris Kringle to even start out with. And then, obviously all the rest of the stuff that happens is darker in a way, or it's at least more violent in a way. But I'd be curious to know more about that.
I think a lot of it, like the themes that we're working with, come from, they just kind of pop up in the story as you start to write them, right? So you start to write a story about Santa Claus, and as I was saying, you start to go down these rabbit holes of like, okay, well, what would that really be like? And then you start thinking about, like the order of the world and the military's, like, what would they need Kris for? And it's sad, but I mean, yeah, there's like that whole bit is a commentary on, our government. And I mean, many governments are very similar, obviously, is that they're always looking for the advantage. They're not looking for the social benevolent reason for Santa Claus. They're looking for, oh, great, this guy's got a great labor force. Like, how do we exploit that and use that into our favor? And I mean, and those are the things that we start going down the rabbit hole that are really fun to kind of start to think about and just kind of layer in there. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, and then you get to the sort of sub layers and the layers upon layers where you're like, oh yeah, well, that means the military and the government are bad. Well, no, not really. It's just a function because it's not necessarily that the military and the government are bad, but they are a business, quote unquote, and that's really what businesses do. So it's not that there's I mean, yes, there's good and bad people in them, but it's something that functions, and that's what that function does. So of course it's going to be trying to exploit something out of a benevolent being who isn't really looking for anything for himself. And that was the other thing. We had a lot of fun just with a being like with Chris and Ruth, who are in it for they're in it for all the right reasons, and they have to deal with all the wrong things about society and life and military and government and world politics just to give somebody a frickin' present and exist and spread love and happiness. And like, they can't even do that without getting completely corrupted and co-opted. And those are the fun themes for us to play with. But again, like, you see those scenes with the military and the government, and it's just, they're not malevolent. They're just well, well, look, Chris, like you signed a contract with us, and like, you know, like that's what the contract said. So we're trying to enforce that. And of course we need a certain amount of this and a certain amount of that if you're going to exist. And you have to find a way to pay your bills, Chris. No, we can't let you slide. Sorry, you know. But then the way that they find a way to let him slide is that they completely take advantage of him and his workforce, you know, for their own selfish reasons. But again, the military shows up. You're like, oh, the military's going to be, there they are, the bad guys. But no, actually, these are just guys doing their job, you know, to the best of their ability. And of course, we make them kind of the B team or the D team of the military because we did see this as, I mean, you just think of the setup, right? It's like, okay, we're going to make these, you know, jet fighter parts over at Santa's workshop. He's a powerful being. He's got his own elves. It's underground. It's already, I mean, he's already pretty layered up on being hidden and safe over there because he runs his own business out of there and he hasn't really had a lot of trouble. So we really don't need that strong of a force over there. Like, let's send you over there, get you built up. And then we're just it's kind of a lazy day kind of operation. You're just going to be kind of cruising around. Yes, we need discipline. Yes, we need men on the floor, but we don't really need to, you know, arm up that heavily because it's just, I mean, we're looking over our product and yes, we want a certain amount of, we want a certain amount of force there, but it's not like, you know, they've got the barbed wire fences up. You know what I mean? It's a pretty lazy operation and should be a pretty gravy job. But of course, what coincides with that is, you know, this little kid hiring a maniac to come and storm his compound. And of course we had a lot of fun with that too. Then it's like, oh, this is going to be great. You know, when this guy gets there, there's a little more than Chris and his elves there, and he's actually got to, you know, make his way through the bushes and sneak around a little bit and take a few guys out, and then we could show how capable he is, and you know, and how kind of ragtag this force is as he kind of busts down the door. And yeah, man, we were just having a lot of fun with a lot of that. And of course, the one badass there, the Captain Jacobs, you know, guy, the one guy that's, you know, probably seen some wartime, you know, puts up a fight, saves an elf or 20, and sacrifices himself in the process, which I think, you know, which is how I see our military force, honestly, which is, you know, in a very positive way. So yeah, we liked flipping that on people. I think that, you know, a lot of times they have a tendency to bring the military in and be like, oh yeah, it's this evil arm of the government, and they're going to come in and, you know, be a dictatorship and throw their weight around. And we had fun kind of playing that up front to let them be kind of enamored by the workforce and the ethics of the elves and Santa, and they all they realize, wow, we're not really that different. This is actually, I'm really digging this. You know, we should work with these guys.
This is all those little scenes of the general or colonel, you know, just being impressed by this is, yeah, absolutely. This is like a wonderful operation you guys have here. It's just, I always love that.
And like when the cookies and candy canes come in, I mean, he's kind of all for it, which you probably weren't expecting either. He's like, well, okay, we should probably like to see implementing this on the base later on. You know, he's ready to take it home with